Okay, so we've spent the first 4 lessons of this unit simplifying using polynomial operations and laws of exponents. So now sometimes to simplify an expression, we need to kind of work backwards and look at factoring out the greatest common factor or the greatest common divisor. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out what is that factor. What's the number that both or all three of the terms in an expression are divisible by that we can basically divide out of that expression. So we have a product of two expressions. So where we've used distribution to simplify, we're going to kind of do the reverse of that. So to do this, we're going to use our calculator. So let's look at our first example. Factor out the GCF, or the greatest common factor, or GCD, sometimes it's called, for the expression below, 35m squared minus 63. So the first thing I noticed that only one term has an m or a variable with it. So we can't include a variable in our greatest common factor. So let's just turn to our calculator, and we're going to take the two terms that we have. If you have three, we'll pick the lowest two terms. So in this case, we're going to pick 35 and 63, and we're going to ignore any negatives to figure out what our GCD is. So to do this, we go to our calculator, have a calculator open. The steps are there on the right next to the steps that we're doing. It says calculator tips. So from here, we're going to select the menu option, number, and then option 5 says greatest common divisor. So greatest common factor is another way I'll call it that too. So GCD. And we're looking for the GCD of 35, and then we put the comma, 63. Okay, so it's going to give us that common number, the biggest number that they are both divisible by, that they share. And you should have gotten 7. So those numbers are both divisible by 7. So here I have GCD. And we got 7. So now what I'm going to do with that GCD, or that 7, is I'm going to divide all my terms by that number. So if I have, let's try a different color. 35. So I'm going to divide this by 7. So each of those terms by 7. So when I divide 35m squared by 7, what do we have? 5m squared. So when we divide that, we're going to end up with 5m squared. Okay. And then when I divide 7 into negative 63, so negative 63 divided by 7, we're going to get negative 9. Yes. So when we rewrite this, again, we've divided out a 7, and we have 5m squared minus 9. Okay. So see how we're going from where we would distribute a term in front of the parentheses to get like 35m squared minus 63. Now we're kind of doing the reverse of that. Okay. Now, example 2 is different in the fact that the first term is negative. So if we have a negative leading coefficient, our GCD or GCF has to be negative too. But as far as like finding my greatest common divisor, I'm going to ignore that negative to start with. So I'm looking for the GCD of 210 and 63. Can you go to your calculator and figure out what the GCD of 210 and 63 is? Again, it's under menu, number, and greatest common divisor, option 5. And then we just put 210, comma, 63. And 21. Negative 21, because that negative 210. So we need to divide both of those terms by our negative 21. But what else do we have in these two terms that our previous terms didn't have. Let me actually, this is really quick. Well, we can look at it this way. So we've got negative 21, negative 21. Look at this. I have, well, x squared is basically just x and x, right? And then I have an x here. Oh. So what else, what other factor do they have in common? They each have at least one. They have at least one x in common. So we can actually take that x out too. Does everybody see that? So if they have at least one x, we can factor out that x too. So now if we do that, if I divide negative 210x squared by negative 21x, then I have a 10 and an x left. Is everybody with me? Because if you have an x squared divided by an x, that just becomes x to the first, okay? Now what if I take 63x and divide it by negative 21x squared? 21x, sorry, not x squared, just x. The x's are going to cancel out, and we're left with, oops, my bad. Yes, negative 3. Okay? So we, again, whatever we divided into both terms, our GCD goes in the front, our GCF goes in the front, what's left? These two terms are going to go right here. 10x minus 3. Again, we just put those terms down here. Okay. How do y'all feel about that? Calculators is helpful in this. Okay, let's look at example 3. So let's move on to having a trinomial, which think about tri meaning 3, like a tricycle has 3. So we're looking at 3 terms. When you have 3 terms, to find your GCF, you need to take the lowest 2. And again, ignore any signs. Let's just look at 2, 6, and 8. What are my lowest 2 of those 3 numbers? 2, 6, and 8. 2 and 6. Okay, so what is our GCD of 2 and 6? Sometimes it's kind of obvious. Is 2 divisible by 3? No. But, well, 2 is only divisible by 1 in itself, right? Is 6 divisible by 2? So that's your GCF. But you can confirm it in your calculator if you don't trust me, but it is 2. Oh, you don't? Oh, don't trust me. Okay, good. Now, if you look here, I only have variables on 2 of my 3 terms. So I can't factor out an x. So I can only factor out that 2. No. So when I divide each of those terms by 2, what do we have left? If I divide 2x squared by 2, what do I have left? X squared, okay. If I divide 6x by 2, what do I have left? 3x, okay. And negative 8 divided by 2. This is when the negatives come back in when we're factoring out our GCF. Negative 4, perfect. So then when we rewrite this, I'm going to write, again, the GCF or GCD goes out front. So that's where I put my 2 out front. And then what am I writing on the inside of my parentheses? Plus 3x, okay. Minus 4. Yeah. Oh, well, minus 4, negative 4, yeah. Yes. Now I'm going to let you, let's talk about 4. You can help me with this one. So first of all, our leading coefficient is negative. So what does that tell us about our GCF? It has to be negative. Nice. But what 2 numbers am I going to use to find my GCF or my GCD? 6 and 9. And don't worry about the signs of those. Just look at them as positive numbers when you're looking for your GCF. Well, I'm thinking about that, 6 and 9. Well, 9 isn't divisible by 6, but what number are they both divisible by? Sometimes, again, we could just look at this and figure it out. 3, because 9 is only divisible by 1, 3, and itself. So 3. And 6 is only divisible by 1, 2, 1 and itself, and 2 and 3. Yeah, so 3 is going to be our GCF. Yes. Can I factor out an x? No. How do we know that we can't? Yes, all of them has to have at least one x, so the negative 12 doesn't. So I'm going to factor out a negative 3 because, remember, our leading coefficient is negative 3, so we need to do this. Yes, so we're dividing by negative 3. So let's figure out here, when we divide, what do we have left? So when I divide negative 6x squared by negative 3, what do I have left? 2x squared, okay. If I divide 9 by negative 3, 9x by negative 3, I'm sorry. Oh, negative 3x, okay, good. And then negative 12x, 12 divided by negative 3, no x. Sorry. Is it 4 or, oh, positive 4. I'm just going to put plus 4. Okay. Now when I rewrite it, what goes outside of the parentheses? Ah, negative 3, I'm glad you caught it. And then, Chris, what am I going to write inside? Okay. And then the negative, and then the positive. So that goes there, and then that'll go down there. Okay. Now, if you were to, okay, to make sure you're done, you can take your 3 terms that you have, like looking at 2, 3, and 4. Say you don't know, like, oh, can I factor out a GCF? You're not sure if you can, but you can check. So if we put 2 and 3 into our calculator, like, so if I went menu number 5 and then I put 2 comma 3 and I got an answer of 1, that tells me it's already factored, like as far as GCF concerned. Because what happens if we divide anything by 1? It's gonna be the same, right? It just stays the same. Now sometimes we may have to factor out a negative 1, but then that's when you want to look for, oh, can I factor out a variable and so forth. But that indicates that we are done.